Nicole once believed that leaving Ted was the first step toward peace. She convinced herself that everything would eventually settle, that the years of strained coexistence and quiet suppression would finally be replaced by the lightness of a new life. But that peace, from the very moment she dared to name it, carried the scent of a lie. It felt like the forced stillness between two storms, when the sky remains heavy and the wind pauses only to gather strength. She left Ted with a decision that was both wise and cowardly. Wise because she could no longer endure the feeling of being looked at like a spiritual debt, like an obligation Ted was determined to fulfill to complete his role. Cowardly because she did not leave to live honestly, but to avoid the moment of confession. Inside Nicole was a sealed box, locked with all the things people use to silence their conscience: busyness, motherhood, family dinners, long trips. Even the vows she would silently repeat each time she watched Martin smile. That box was not a single secret, but an entire system. If it were opened, not just one story would spill out, an entire life would shatter. Nicole did not hate Ted the way one hates a betrayer. She hated him the way one hates a mirror that reflects one's own weakness. Ted had loved her in his way, earnest, persistent, stubborn. He had sacrificed in a way that forced others to feel indebted, to feel guilty for never loving enough in return. Beside him, Nicole was not just a wife, she was the recipient of a love as heavy as duty. And the more she was loved that way, the smaller she felt. She could not rebel, because rebellion would mean admitting she was unworthy of such decency. She could not confess, because confession would turn all that decency into a farce. In the early days after the separation, Nicole threw herself into a new rhythm with a near-desperate eagerness. She changed Martin's schedule, changed his school, changed his friends, even changed houses, as if altering the scenery could alter fate. She attached herself to small goals so she would not have to look at the greatest goal she feared, the truth about Martin. Every time she held her son, she wanted both to tighten her grip and to let go. In the moments when he nestled against her for warmth, Nicole felt an invisible hand tightening around her throat, the sensation of being both redeemed and condemned. Carlton appeared like an escape, not because he offered a perfect love, but because he offered something Nicole lacked, the feeling of being understood without explanation. Carlton did not look at her as a project to save, nor as a moral ideal. He saw her as a woman cracking under pressure, and that fracture gave her permission to be weak. Yet the more she leaned on him, the more she feared she was merely exchanging one shackle for another, trading one pair of arms as a refuge from the first. Behind Carlton's calm exterior lay a restless turmoil. He had once been Ted's friend, had shared tables and laughter as if friendship were indestructible. And now, every time he walked beside Nicole, he heard in his mind the shattering of a vow he had never spoken yet still felt guilty for breaking. He could blame circumstances, the years apart, the way maturity changes people. But if he were truly innocent, why did he feel cornered, pressed daily by an invisible verdict? That night long ago between Nicole and Carlton had been softened with the gentlest words: impulsive, drunk, a mistake. As long as it was framed as an error, they could close it and move forward without looking back. But mistakes have structures. They do not fall from nowhere, they grow from deprivation, from loneliness, from cracks already present. Nicole entered that night feeling forgotten within her own marriage, while Carlton entered it feeling he was living a hollow life, always standing at the edge of what mattered. They rushed into each other as if one moment of oblivion could be enough for rebirth. Then Martin was born, a miracle to Ted, a gift to the world, but to Nicole a riddle shaped like a child. From the day Martin arrived, Nicole lived into layers of reality. On the surface, the devoted mother striving for completeness. Underneath, the woman scrutinizing every feature of her son's face. There were moments when Martin smiled and the resemblance to Carlton chilled her to the bone. Yet in other moments, when Martin fell into quiet thought, he resembled Ted so painfully it hurt. The resemblance became torture. To look like either man was a crime. Nicole once believed she could endure forever if she alone knew. But secrets never stay obedient in one person's hands. They always find a way out through the smallest details, through coincidences, through others inadvertently resurrecting the past. A routine health check, a request for genetic testing over a minor anomaly, an innocent question from a doctor, any of it was enough to make the ground tremble beneath her. She began to see everything around her as a trap leading to a single point. One day, the truth would be spoken without her consent. Carlton did not choose to revisit the past. The present forced him to confront it. The more he looked at Martin, the less he could deceive himself. Small gestures, unconscious habits, the way the boy furrowed his brow, a stubbornness that did not belong to Ted, each sign pierced his defenses. Carlton wrestled with two opposing fears, that Martin truly was his son, and that he was not. If Martin were his, he would be the man who had betrayed his old friend in the cruelest way. If not, then all his suspicion was arrogance, a selfish desire to belong to someone. Then, in a moment he was unprepared for, Carlton saw Nicole intimate with another man. The jealousy was not just romantic. It was the fury of someone who had wagered his soul on a secret only to realize he was merely an option. That fire drove him to act like a man cornered. He no longer wanted explanations. Explanations only prolonged the pain. He wanted an answer he could hold stamp and end with truth on paper. In the suffocating silence, the idea of sending a DNA sample was no longer a choice but an instinct of self-preservation. Nicole understood before Carlton spoke. He saw in his eyes the resolve of someone tired of patchwork solutions. She was terrified, not of the result, but of losing control of the narrative. For years, she had believed she alone held the key. If the test happened, the secret would no longer depend on her courage or cowardice. It would be judged by a cold number, by an indifferent conclusion. That realization sparked a strange anger within her. She wanted both to seize back control and to throw everything away to end the torment. Ted, on the other side, sensed the shift before any evidence appeared. He did not need words. He only needed to see Nicole avoid his gaze, to notice her forced busyness, to feel Martin become the center of every tension. Some men, when threatened, shout and break things. Ted did not. His silence appeared noble, but in truth it was discipline. Silence to observe, silence to calculate. Silence to make others uneasy because they could not read his thoughts. He began acting like a man accustomed to power and righteousness. He hired a lawyer, gathered documents, recorded schedules, scrutinized Nicole's life as if preparing for trial. Outwardly, it was about protecting his dignity and paternal rights. Inwardly, it was about resisting the feeling of being stripped. He could accept Nicole leaving. He could tell himself he remained decent despite abandonment. But if Martin was not his, then that decency became foolishness exploited. No one wants to be the man who loved a child wholeheartedly only to realize he had been a facade for someone else's sin. Nicole saw the change in Ted and felt both guilt and rage. Guilt because she had placed him there, rage because she hated how he turned pain into power. Each time she heard he had consulted lawyers, she felt he was not just trying to keep Martin, but to keep the right to judge her. No matter the truth, Ted could stand as the injured party, deserving sympathy. Nicole bitterly realized that some people do not need to win in love, they only need to win the story. Martin, innocent, became the center of a battle he did not understand. He sensed what adults tried to hide, the heaviness in the air, the prolonged silences, the evasive glances, the embraces that were too tight. His quiet was not calm, it was survival. He learned to observe, to guess, to stay silent so as not to make things worse. That silence frightened the adults more, because they did not know what was forming in his mind, peace or a storm. Eventually, the secret found its way out through the cruelest means, an envelope containing test results. Whether sent in desperation by Carlton or triggered by medical coincidence, the moment it lay on the table felt fated. It was not just paper. It was a blade. Nicole looked at it as a verdict, wanting both to tear it apart and to open it to end the suspension. Carlton saw redemption and self-destruction. Ted saw an enemy and evidence. And if Martin were to touch it, he would touch the moment childhood closed. If the result confirmed Carlton as the father, joy would not come as expected. No one would cry from happiness, only a shock draining blood. Carlton could not rejoice without admitting he had taken something from Ted. Nicole could not feel relief without admitting she had lived in deceit too long. Ted could not simply rage. Rage would not restore the years he had given. Every emotion would blend into a poison all must drink. If the result were otherwise, tragedy would be no less. Nicole might spiral into doubt. Had she unconsciously clung to the possibility of Carlton to fill her fear of abandonment? Had she used it to explain her distance from Ted instead of admitting that sometimes people part simply because love fades? Carlton would face the shame of self-importance. Ted would become a bitter victor, retaining fatherhood but exposing his capacity for control and revenge. In both cases, the question would not be who the biological father is, but who chooses to be a father. Should Carlton step into a toad or withdraw to preserve Martin's image of Ted? Step in and shatter a fragile family, withdraw and condemn himself to a lifetime outside his own blood. Ted's silence, was it fear of loss or knowledge that truth is more complex than DNA? Perhaps he had long suspected but chose to love Martin as his own to avoid collapse. If so, Ted was not just a victim but a participant in the silence. Nicole stood in the center, anger flaring desperately. She was angry at Ted for turning love into a weapon. Angry at Carlton for digging up what she had buried. Most of all, angry at herself for allowing one impulsive night to become a noose tightening around her life. She understood confession was not only liberation but explosion. It might free her from guilt, but it could destroy Martin, Ted, Carlton, and the beautiful memories they clung to. In the end, who is the victim? Nicole carries irredeemable remorse but chose deception. Ted bears wounded honor but wields it as control. Carlton is trapped between love and guilt, but once stepped into error without foresight. And Martin, who made no choices, must live with their consequences. The path to forgiveness does not resemble a happy ending. It resembles surgery without anesthesia, cutting, pain, loss. If they have any chance, it comes only when each confronts the worst part of themselves. But in their world, where honor is measured by public gaze and love by possession, truth does not open the door to forgiveness. It opens the door to war. And once the envelope is opened, whatever the result, the peace Nicole once imagined will reveal itself not as a destination, but as a temporary illusion before buried secrets explode. Every embrace, even Carlton's, will no longer be refuge. Only one harsh choice remains: live in silence as a lifelong sentence, or speak to save oneself, knowing that salvation may mean watching others fall.